Hello. Well, here we are, third grade students. We're launching out to work on something that may be quite a task for all of us. And this is the training site for the M-Step third grade ELA student session. And we're going to start working on this little assessment. The following tests have been scheduled for training student. Once instructed, click on the test link below to start the test. If no additional tests are available, please select Exit to close the application. We're going to look at ELA third grade. And there are 3 circles on the screen. You do not see 3 circles, please raise your hand. And I see 3 circles. If you do see the 3 circles, click the next button, which is down here. And we need to move this down a little bit. And move this down a little bit. And here's our next button. Practice the sample items. The following set of questions is intended to provide you with an opportunity to learn about the different kinds of questions you may see on the M-Step test. You can try these sample questions as many times as you want. Click the next button right here. Each question will show us each question will tell you what you need to do to answer it. You will use the pointer tool to help in answering questions. So reading the questions is very, very important on the assessment, on the practice. And one of the best reading strategies we have is rereading something when it's difficult. Find the correct answer to the question, then choose the correct answer by selecting the answer bubble using the pointer tool. To change an answer, use the pointer tool. For questions, to change an answer, use the pointer tool. For questions that ask you to type your response or demonstrate your answer, use the keyboard or the online tools for that question to provide your response. Use the next button to continue. After you finish answering a question, you will need to select the next arrow, which is this icon, to move to the next question. If you want to repeat a question, go back to a question you have already seen or answered, select the back arrow. When reading a passage, scroll up and down using the scroll bar to the right of the text. Select the flag button if you are not sure of the answer of a question. It will mark the question so you know to go back and answer the question later. You can flag questions, but it's best so that you don't get lost in assessment to take each question one at a time and do your best and carefully read or reread each section to make your best selection. If you need to go away from your computer, select the pause button. Select the resume button to continue. If you're away from your computer for more than 20 minutes, you will need to log back in. Select the help button to find more information. There are several tools to help you with the questions. There's the highlighter. You can highlight text on the screen. You can magnify. Use the magnifier tool to enlarge the information on the screen. Use the pointer tool to choose an answer. And there's a cross-off button. Use the cross-off tool to mark answers that you believe are not correct. These are all tools that you can use to help take the assessment. There's also sticky notes that pops up a little blank yellow sticky note, and you can type ideas in there if you want to organize your thoughts. You may want to reference later in the test. There's the line guide. Use the line guide tool to help you track a single line of text as you are reading. Select and drag the blue box to move a blue line up and down through the text. This is just a tracking device, kind of like a ruler or a strip of paper that you can use to help you stay focused on the lines of text that you're reading. Next button. Completing the test. Use the next until there's no longer it's there. You'll have an opportunity to go back. At the very end, you can review and end the test to be sure you have answered all the questions. You can either select the question line to move directly to that question, or you may use the Return to Questions button to return to the questions. Once you are done taking the test, select the End Test button, End Test, to end your test. You will be reminded one more time to either review or to end your test. On test day, be careful. You will not be able to re-enter the test once the End Test button is used. So this is the last thing you would click, is the End Test, and that's when you have everything done and you're very pleased with your work, and you click End Test. Sample the questions begin on the next page. Select the Begin the Test button to see the first sample question. Remember, the sample questions are a good opportunity to see different item types and to practice using the tools that may be available on the test day. Let's begin the test. Okay, I need to reposition our screen so that we have all of it there. Okay, now I've repositioned it so we can see all of what's on the screen. In question 1, and these are ELA English Language Arts sample items. Here we have a story to read, and on this story you can see this, we can scroll down to see more additional text that we need to read. Then we have a question over here, some choices. The directions here says read the passage, then answer the questions. Quite often when we read something, we just have a full page of text, but you can see this panel here we would read, then there's a panel here we would read, and then from this panel we would find our answers. So let's read the passage. A Few New Neighbors by Carrie McGee. One afternoon, Jessie spotted a tiny bird flutting around Miss Baxter's front door. Mrs. Baxter had just moved into an apartment. It's probably looking for somebody to fill the bird feeders, Jessie thought. The bird perched on the edge of the wreath, then it disappeared. Disappeared? Jessie ran over to Mrs. Baxter's door. Where had it gone? A jumble of sticks and grass stuck out from the middle of the wreath. Suddenly Jessie understood. A nest! A bird's nest sat right in the middle of Mrs. Baxter's wreath. The bird poked its head out and looked at Jessie. Then it fluttered away. I'm having trouble following along, so I'm going to go up here and use my line guide. And let's bring it down here. Right there, it fluttered away. Jessie crept up to the front door. Tucked inside the nest were 4 speckled blue eggs. Now I want to scroll up here to see more. Jessie ran home to call Mrs. Baxter. Guess who moved into our old Guess who moved into our old wreath, Jessie said. A family of birds. Mrs. Baxter sounded just as excited as Jessie was. Tell me what they look like. What color are the eggs? Jessie and Mr. Baxter talked about the birds for a while. They sounded like house finches, Miss Baxter said. Keep an eye on them for me, will you? I will, Jessie said. And she did. Jessie checked the nest whenever she could. Sometimes the mother finch was there, and other days the red-headed papa was nearby. Jessie tried to notice everything so she could tell Mrs. Baxter. One morning, Jessie saw a pink head poking out of the nest. Babies! Jessie strained her neck to get a better look. Jessie told her dad about the baby birds at Mrs. Baxter's house. That reminds me, Dad said. Mrs. Baxter has movers coming tomorrow to clear out the house. I told her I'd unlock the door for them. But what about the nest? Dad shook his head. We'll just have to tell the movers to be careful. Jessie thought about the movers tromping in and out, squeezing heavy boxes and furniture past the tiny nest. She thought about the door swinging and slamming all day long. It seemed risky. The next morning, Jessie watched the moving truck pull up in front of Mrs. Baxter's house. Dad saw the truck too and came outside with the key. There's still more text here, so I'm going to scroll down one more time. Jessie jumped. She ran ahead of the movers and Dad to Mrs. Baxter's front door. Wait, she shouted, spinning around to face them. Behind her, the mama bird burst out of its nest. It landed in a tree. The movers looked at Jessie in surprise. You can't use this door, Jessie said, holding her arms out stiff. I'm sorry, one of the movers said. We have a job to do. Jessie didn't move. There's a nest in the wreath, Jessie explained. If you open the door, it will fall. The other mover sighed. Do you have any ideas? Jessie nodded. I do have an idea. Dad, can I have the key? There's more text down here, so I've got to scroll down one more time. Now I've got to the end. Back up here. As carefully as she could, Jessie unlocked the front door and eased it open. Then it was just wide enough to slip through. She ducked into Mrs. Baxter's house. She'd been in there many times, so it didn't take her long to find the side door and unlock it from the inside. Got it, Jessie called, running around to the front of the door. The side door is open. One of the movers was peering into the wreath. Hey, he said. There are babies in there. He grinned at Jessie. I bet that mama bird is glad you're watching out for her babies. Jessie smiled as she and Dad thanked the movers for their help. Then she ran and disappeared into their own house. She couldn't wait to call Mrs. Baxter. This is from a book called A Few New Neighbors by Carrie McGee from Highlights of Children. Now over here, it says, read the sentence and the directions that follow. Children and adults can work together. This is a very important sentence they want us to understand. Read the sentence and directions that follow. Children and adults can work together. Click the 2 details that best supports this conclusion. This here, what they're saying is this statement here is the conclusion about this story. So which of these two statements down below, they best support the conclusion? One afternoon, Jessie spotted a tiny bird fluttering around Mrs. Baxter's front door. Mrs. Baxter had just moved into an apartment. Jessie and Mr. Baxter talked about the birds for a while. They sound like finches. Mrs. Baxter said, "Keep an eye on them for me, will you?" Okay, so we need to make a choice here. Children and adults can work together. Here we see Jessie spotted tiny in Mrs. Baxter's front door. Mrs. Baxter had just moved in an apartment. But over here, it says Jessie and Miss Baxter talked about the birds. They sound like house finches, Mr. Baxter said. Keep an eye on them for me. So I think this here is the best one. And we have to indicate that some way. So we need to click on two details that best supports the conclusion. And when I click on these, you can see that they turn on and off. These are all the different choices I could pick. I want to pick two details that supports they're working together. They sound like finches. I think definitely keep an eye on them for me, will you, is a good choice. Children and adults can work together. This is they sound like house finches, Mrs. Baxter said. Here they talked about the birds for a while, and when they talking means they're working together. So I would, if we can only click two, they talked about the birds for a while, and they said, keep an eye on them for me, will you? So I'm going to pick these two, and then we're going to go on. Now, over here on the next one, we see that we still have the same story, a few neighbors, and this story has not changed, but we have a different question. This question has two parts. First, part A, then answer part B. Part A, which sentence best describes the lesson of the passage? The lesson of the passage. If I get my highlighter here, can I get my highlighter? Use highlighter, let's see. Yeah, I'm highlighting. The lesson. Which sentence best describes the lesson of the passage? So I'm thinking about the lesson. That's something that is going to help us learn about. So it's kind of like an idea that this story is trying to teach us. Animals should be protected. Birds should only nest in trees. Movers should listen to children, or children should stay away from birds. I think we can see in the story of what happens is that everybody works together to protect the animals. So I think the best answer is animals should be protected. Birds should only nest in trees. We know that can't work because I've seen birds nest in different places. Movers should listen to children, not necessarily. Sometimes children can have good ideas for the movers. Children should stay away from birds. I think children can get close to birds. I know my kids in 4-H, they watch chickens, and so they're close to birds. So I like this answer the best. So we're going to go on to the next question. Now here's part B. Once again, our story over here is the same. This question has two parts. First, answer part A, then answer part B. Part B, which sentence from the passage, and I'm going to highlight, best supports your answer in part A, which we just answered before, okay? So now we're going to go back and look at what was in the story that best supports our answer in part A. Now, if we're a little confused what to do, if we go back, we can see animals should be protected. So we're looking for something in the story that helps us to understand animals should be protected. And so, let's see, a bird's nest sat right in the middle of Mrs. Baxter's wreath. Well, because it's set there, that could be a dangerous place. Jessie and Mrs. Baxter talk about the birds for a while. That talking helps them. One morning, Jessie saw a pink head poking out of the nest. You can't use this door, Jessie said, holding her arms out stiff. Now, if we picked animals should be protected, this action right here, if we think about this one down here, I think this is the answer. And let's get our crossouts here. I like this answer the best because it really shows Jessie is trying to protect the animals. One morning, Jessie saw a pink head. Well, that's nice. She noticed the babies were there. They talked about the birds. That's a good thing they were talking about them. A bird's nest sat right in the middle of Mrs. Baxter's wreath. That's that's just a factual thing from the story. But the idea that best supports our answer from part A, and part A is over here,